All right, let's keep talking about the economy because, again, government's always going to tell us, nothing to see here. Opposition's going to say, terrible as it is from EQ Economics is none other than Warren Hogan. I always love him because he's always going to tell us what's actually going on. I don't know if you heard Stephen Conroy there, but he referred to the Reserve Bank as bedwetters. Do you agree with him because they're a little too up or a little too down, or is this the Goldilocks approach to how Australia's going?
Well, Paul, I watch Stephen's commentary on the Reserve Bank because he is the best forward indicator of a rate hike. When his rhetoric starts to really amp up and his attacks on them get personal, we know they're about to hike rates. So it is actually destructive because the reason central banks are independent and senior respected politicians like Stephen shouldn't do that is they have to make the tough decisions that our politicians can't. And the problem, what we've seen in the last couple of months confirmed today, is that great news. The private sector is coming back. People are spending pretty consistently now. Businesses are investing. But we've got no ability to grow the economy without creating inflation because, first of all, we didn't slow the economy enough. We didn't raise rates high enough in the first place. And so as soon as the economy is recovering, it's creating inflation pressure again. And that's a reality. It's not because the Reserve Bank's got their foot on the throat of the economy. It's quite the opposite. We're getting growth in the economy when you include inflation of around 6%, nominal growth. The interest rate probably should be around 5%. It would have been under Glenn Stevens or Ian Macfarlane. And we're just way too low. And you can see it in the housing market. House prices are going up, even though they're extremely expensive for most people. So his analysis is wrong and it's counterproductive.
Okay, one day we'll get you two in the same room and it'll be fun for everyone to watch the brawl, the fight, the back and forth. I look forward to it. Let's talk, though, again about those little cat's whiskers that you look for that tell us how things are going. Because to me, I obviously try to look at it from an individual's perspective rather than that sort of holistic approach. When I see a country where 3 million people are going to run out of food, when I see the mortgage stress, the power bill stress, all the rest of it, but also I know the reality is that, personal debt never been higher. People love living larger than they did, say, 20, 30 years ago. Is this part of the political reality that the government's allowed to get away with piddling up against the wall because we do too?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that we have a very good access to credit, and that was the big change in the last 30 years, and now we've got access to our mortgage offset accounts, and so people can get through tough times. They don't improve their position. But the thing that's really different is our economy is unlike the economy that was around before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we couldn't find jobs for everyone. Unemployment was the problem. But that's all changed with the retirement of this baby boomer generation. And now we can't find enough people to fill the jobs. We've got labour shortages. That's why our economy's speed limit's only 2% growth. And that's why anything stronger is likely to create inflation. And what the government's doing by increasing its presence in the economy and throwing a lot of money into the care economy is making it harder for the private sector to increase our capacity by investing. Now, we had some good news on investment, and it's great. There was some really good news in this with the private sector investing and spending. But the problem is with the government also out there spending more than ever and not investing. The government investing is great. We've seen some great infrastructure, but it's that recurrent spending and particularly the funding of the private sector activity. And it's not efficient. That's why we've got no productivity. And of course, that productivity is where we get increases in wages above inflation and our living standards go up. And that's the problem for most Australians, is their standard of living is not improving because of the cost of living, because they can't get their wages to grow higher than inflation. It doesn't matter if it's government prices or it's private sector prices. That is the lived experience in this country. And we're not used to it because the previous 25 years, we created one of the best economies in the world and one of the wealthiest economies or one of the wealthiest household sectors because we had productivity. So that's the big problem for us now. And we're not solving it through government. We've got to get the private sector investing in all this new technology. We've got to get people into the right jobs, etc.
But also what seems to be the design, right? There's a design fault in the way that the federal budget's put together, where it's in structural deficit because 37% of the entire budget goes on social security and welfare, right, compared to, say, 6% in defence. Government's fiddling around earlier in the week pretending, we're going to save money in defence. Well, you want to save some real money? There's an area to go after. The single largest source of revenue for the government, it's not company tax, not GST, it's the average person working however long they do. It feels to me like the system is now built into the DNA that it's going to screw most of the people most of the time, and good luck to you if you can somehow overcome it. But it also requires us as voters to want to demand more than a system that does that to us all the time, right?
Well, yeah, and look, the bigger picture is there's this idea that Australians increasingly since the pandemic want government to help and expect more of government and the aging of the population, but at the same time there's only so much government can do, and the government's effectively taking over key elements of things like aged care and childcare and the NDIS. Whereas if there was a private sector with competition and innovation and doing it efficiently, it would cost us as a country less. But we're not going that route. But then, of course, the point is we're paying through it through higher taxes. And I think that Australians eventually get to a point where they realise that their tax burden is just so high, and is it being used wisely? There's huge political consequences for the government of the day when people get to that point of just saying, this is not right. And I think we're close. I think it's happening. The real risk for the government in the next 2 years ahead of the next election is that they should be getting the RBA to hike rates now, because if this inflation starts to get away from us and they have to hike rates a lot, and the longer you leave it, the more you're going to have to do, we could end up with a major downturn in the economy. And of course, that's really going to get people asking questions. So look, I think it's a really risky time for the government. And I think next week we'll see them come out and talk about cutting back spending to try and seem to be doing something. But the reality is it's too late. They've actually over-egged it already. They can't act quickly enough. The RBA is the only one who can get it under control.
Well, and remember, again, nobody seems to refer to this. I certainly know you know it, but people don't refer to it. The intergenerational report tells us that there's going to be a budget deficit every year for the next 40 years. $1 trillion in debt. Guess what that means? 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.7. And then the priority of paying off goes higher and higher. It's just crazy. Anyway, lovely to talk to you, mate. EQ Economics, Warren Hogan. Lovely bloke, great insight. Thank you. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Paul.